Okay, we're up to the Mishnah on Kuf Ches Amid Aleph. Today's daf deals a lot with mixtures of milk and meat. When do you need shishim? When is it a problem? Okay, so the Mishnah says like this: Tipas chalav shenafal chaticha. You have a drop of milk that falls on a piece of meat that's in a pot. Now, one important case. It's a machlokes rishonim exactly what the case is. Either the meat is partially submerged in sauce, partially out of the sauce, or there's another opinion it's completely out of the sauce. Let's go with the opinion of the Taisvis that it's completely out of the sauce. So basically it's a case like this. You have a pot that's open, no lid on top, of meatballs. Some of the meatballs are in the sauce. This meatball happens to be sitting outside of the sauce on top of other meatballs. Now, a drop of milk goes into that meatball. The meatball is not shishim to the milk, so the meatball's a problem. Mishnah says, if that meatball is not 60 times the size of the milk, that meatball is a problem. Now here's the question. What about the rest of the pot? There's a general rule when it comes to kashrus, which is, there is no transfer of flavor without a liquid medium. Now, if this meatball was sitting in a sauce, so the sauce would travel and carry the milk. But it's not sitting in the sauce, it's out of the sauce. If the cover was on top, that would create a steam in the pot that would also carry it, but it's not. So right now you have an usser meatball on top, but all the other meatballs are technically fine because it's not going to spread because there's no liquid medium. However, says the Mishnah, near sakadera, but if you then stir the pot, now taking that meatball and putting it in, then the halacha is, now, let me clarify. Basically, it's two different iterations. The milk falls on the meatball, asks the meatball. If you then stir the pot, then that meatball, as the Gemara is going to clarify, the Gemara is going to explain, that meatball will now trafe up the rest of the pot. But let's say near sakadera, the Mishnah's case is where as the milk is falling in, I quickly stir it. I stir it so quickly that it didn't have a chance to settle into the meatball. So in essence, what I did was I took that drop of milk and I allowed it to fall into the sauce. So then, while originally we had the milk into the meatball, where it was like looking at it like in the card game War, like you're looking at meatball and the milk, you look at it as an isolated case. Is there shishim or not? But if you stir it right away, then the milk gets mixed in to the entire pot. Then I'm not looking at an isolated shaila of is there shishim in the meatball. I'm looking in the whole pot. Is there shishim in the entire pot corresponding to the drop of milk? If there is, then everything's fine. If there isn't, then everything's treif. Because I mixed it in as the milk was falling in, so it never had a chance to settle into an isolated case of milk and meatballs. Rather, just a drop of milk basically fell into the entire pot. Okay, that is the Mishnah. Now, a couple things you got to know. We're going to go through the daf a little slow. We'll go through it as best we can. There's a concept in Gemara that we're going to do right now. It's called tam ke'ikr, which means, what is the status of the flavor of isser, but not the isser itself? I'll give you an example. You have a piece of chazer that falls into a pot. We know the pot needs to be shishim, correspond to the piece of chazer. If not, the entire pot's a treif. Let's say I drop a piece of chazer in. It's shishim. Or stam, I drop a piece of chazer in, and then I find the chazer and I throw it out. Is everything okay, or do I still need shishim? Now, in this pot right now, there's no more chazer. The mamish of the chazer is not there, but there's tam, there's flavor. The chazer has imparted flavor into the pot without the original piece. The question is the requirement of shishim when the original piece is not there, but the flavor, is that doraisa or is that only derabanan? Is tam ke'ikr? Is the flavor of the isser like the ikr itself, like the isser itself, or not? So it says the Gemara, Rabbi, Abaye says, I want to prove that tam, the flavor, is a biblical issue, meaning it's a deraisa dika problem. I'll prove it to you. Every time you have a meatball that falls into milk, and the milk is not 60 times corresponding to the meatball. So what's the halacha? The meatball's a problem, and the milk's a problem. Now, because the Torah says milk and meat are a problem. Now, in this case, it's seemingly the pasha case is not where I'm eating the meatball. I take the meatball out, I still can't drink the milk, right? I think everyone that's listening to this, if I had a piece of meat that fell into milk, and the milk was 5 times the piece of meat, so the rabbi would say the meat's a problem and the milk's a problem. Now, I can't drink this milk. Midaraisa. If you ask someone, deraisa, it's bas b'chalav. Now, there's no meat here. The meat I removed. The answer is there's tam. So every case of bas b'chalav, of answering the milk is where it's just tam. You're not talking about eating the meat. You're talking about drinking the milk. Now, in the milk, there's the flavor of meat. So says Abaya, tam ki'ikr is doraisa, and it's learned out from basa b'chalav. These all gedetich derabanan. And by the way, and then you could apply from basa b'chalav where it's doraisa to chazer and to lobster and to nevela and on to treif and these things. These all gedetich derabanan, because if you believe that in general tam ki'ikr is only derabanan, basa b'chalav, my time of why can't you learn out from basa b'chalav? Basa b'chalav, definitely the Torah is asering flavor. So you have a choice now. I learn everything out from basa b'chalav, or basa b'chalav is unique. So the Gemara says I should be able to learn out from basa b'chalav. Why? If you don't learn out from basa b'chalav, what would be the reason? The chidushu, you would have to say that the reason why we can't learn out from basa b'chalav, that maybe in general tam ki'ikr is not doraisa. By basa b'chalav it is. Basa b'chalav is unique. What makes basa b'chalav unique? It's a chiddush. What makes it a chiddush is that it's unlike any other prohibition in the Torah, is that it starts off with 2 kosher foods, and yet when 2 kosher foods combine together, it creates a problem. So it's a chiddush. So you could argue that really tam ki'ikr is not doraisa, and I don't learn out from basa b'chalav. Well, even though by basa b'chalav it is tam, I don't learn out from basa b'chalav. Here's the problem, though, says the Gemara. If you're going to say that we don't learn out from basa b'chalav because basa b'chalav is a chiddush, then ichidushu afagav doleka nosin tam nami. So then why is basa b'chalav permitted when there's shishim? If a drop of milk falls into meat and there's shishim, we say it's fine. But why? You'll say, because everything's shishim. Yeah, but if basa b'chalav is such a chiddush that you can't learn out tam ki'ikr, then maybe it's such a chiddush that it should have its own rules, and it shouldn't be. And even if it wasn't aval gav deleka noisin tam, even if a drop of milk falls into 1,000 of meat, it should be a problem, right? Because you tell me it's a chiddush, then if it's such a chiddush, then it can't be compared to other isurim. What's the answer? It's not such a chiddush. So if it's not such a chiddush, then I could learn out tam ki'ikr from basa b'chalav. Amalei Rava responds, no, really tam ki'ikr could not be doraisa. By basa b'chalav it is. You can't learn out from basa b'chalav. Basa b'chalav is a chiddush. If it's such a chiddush, then why does it have the rules of shishim? Says Rava, I'll tell you why. Derech bishul asatar, because the pasuk says lo savashel. Lo savashel means that the Torah is saying it's only a problem if there's bishul means flavor. Bishul means imparting flavor. It's only a problem if there's imparting flavor, and up to shishim it's imparting flavor. If it's 1 in 1,000, there's no flavor being imparted. It has nothing to do with a chiddush. Even if it's a chiddush, the pasuk says lo savashel. Lo savashel implies that it has to be in the rules of cooking. That it has to be in the rules of cooking is imparting flavor, and imparting flavor is shishim. Now, we said in the Mishnah, let's go with the meatball case. If a drop of milk that falls onto the meatball outside of the sauce, that meatball becomes aser. And it says Rav, kivan shenas and tam b'chaticha, once that meatball becomes aser, chaticha atzma nasis nevela v'yiseres kol chatichas kulam neishem mina. Okay, so this is a concept that we had about, it was last Shabbos' daf. This is called chaticha atzma nasis nevela. Chaticha atzma nasis nevela means like this. How do you look at this meatball? You have 1 ounce, let's go numbers. The meatball is 10 ounces, and 1 ounce of milk fell in. The meatball is for sure a problem. The question is, there's 2 ways to look at this. You could look at it as the meatball itself is still permitted, it just happens to have 1 ounce of milk in it. It's like a sponge. If that meatball were to fall into other meatballs, as long as the other meatballs are 60 times the original milk, 60 times that 1 ounce of milk, everything's going to be fine. Because the meatball doesn't become aser, it's just housing 1 ounce of milk. So if it falls into the rest of the meatballs, as long as the shishim, the rest of the meatballs correspond to the milk, you're fine. Or no. Chaticha atzma nasis nevela means that we look at that piece, that meatball becomes iser. Because it has milk in it, it doesn't just house the milk, it becomes a new piece of iser. It's now basa b'chalav of a meatball. And therefore, if it falls into other pot, you don't have to just worry about the milk, you have to worry about the meatball itself. The meatball itself needs to be mevatel. So if the meatball was 10 ounces, you would need 600 ounces in the new pot. So Rav says that's how he looks at it. Kiva shenasan tam b'chaticha, once that meatball becomes aser, chaticha atzma nasis nevela, the meatball itself becomes intrinsically forbidden, not just that it houses milk, it's aser. Now when you mix it in, what happens here? You have a meatball that's aser mixed in with other meatballs. And I told you shishim, but the truth is the Gemara says it's min b'mino. They're both the same type. They're both meatballs. And min b'mino, the Gemara follows the view of lo batal, which we don't paskin like, but the Gemara says va'useres kol hachatichas kulan. Therefore, the entire pot is going to be a problem. It doesn't matter the ratio. So if you have a pot of meatballs, the milk falls onto the meatball outside of the sauce, that meatball becomes aser. Not just that it's housing iser, it becomes iser itself, and then when it gets mixed into other meatballs, it's all going to be aser because min b'mino. Okay. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Let me just say outside, we'll see it inside. You're telling me that the meatballs are for sure going to be a problem. Doesn't matter. But why is it a problem? You say because the meatball is aser, chaticha nasus navela, and then it's min b'mino with the other meatballs. Totally get it. What about the fact that it's in a sauce, and the sauce came from a jar, right? So the sauce has onions, and the sauce has peppers, and all these things. So it's not just meatballs with meatball, right? You have one meatball that's forbidden, and it's with other meatballs. If it's just meatball and other meatballs, it's min b'mino, it's not batal. But this is actually an example where it's a meatball, mino, with other meatballs, min b'mino, and a sauce. And the sauce is not the min. So it's min b'mino v'she'eno mino. Meaning, when you have a meatball and sauce, they're not the same type. The meatball is a meatball, and the sauce is a sauce. That's batal b'shishim. Meatball and other meatballs is not batal. In this case, it's not just meatball and other meatballs. It's meatball with other meatballs that are min b'mino and a sauce. So that's an example of min and mino and eno mino. And the halacha is that in such a situation, we isolate. What we do is we take the sauce and we say, is the sauce 60 times the isser? If it is, then everything's fine. We don't say, well, it's min b'mino, it's not batal. We actually isolate it. We take the isser, we isolate it somehow, and we compare it to the sauce. And we say, is the min, is the isser, and the mino, and the eno mino, is it 60 times? If it's 60 times, it's mutter. Then we reintroduce the rest of the meatballs, but it's already fine. So how could Rav say that it's automatically a problem? Because the meatball becomes aser and asers the other meatballs, no matter what the ratio. But if there's sauce here, we should look at it. Is the sauce 60 times the meatball? Then it is, and it's fine. So why did Rav just say it's unequivocally a problem? It should depend on the ratio with the sauce, which is eno mino. Says the Gemara, Amrle Mar Zutra Breder Rav Mari Ravina Michti. Rav come on Amrle Shmaitik Rav Yudam Mimun Labatal. Rav is following the view of Mimun Labatal. Lema Pligad the Rava. What about Rava? Damar Rava said, Kasav Rav Yehuda, Kol Shu Min B'mino V'davar Acher. Anytime you have a mixture of a min b'mino, you have the isser, and you have the same thing that's not isser, so meatball aser, non-aser meatballs, so they're the same type. The eno mino, and you have the sauce. You isolate it, and you take the isser, and you isolate it with the sauce, and you say, well, is it shishim? If it is, then it's mutter. So why is Rav saying it's unequivocally a problem? Aren't we talking about a case of meatball and other meatballs and a sauce? So the Gemara answers, no, we're not talking about another sauce. It's just meatballs. So what do you mean? How? The answer is, he took meatballs, and he just stewed it, where any juice that's coming off is not a nomino. It's not a sauce that you buy in the store. It's meatball juice, so it's actually meatball itself. It's all min b'mino. I mean, it's not a case of a sauce at all. The Gemara says, "Amrlei, eat the nafa b'roitev racha chanami." If it was taka with a water or with a soup or with a sauce, I would agree with you. Hachamayaskin and the nafa b'roitev ava. It's a thick gravy made up entirely of meatball sediment. It's not. There is no. The entire pot is just meatballs. That's it. There is no water. There's no spices. There's no peppers. There's no sauce. If there was, then we would isolate them. We would say, is the sauce 60 times the aser meatball, then everything's fine. But that's not the case here. Now, okay, so we said, Rav holds that the meatball becomes aser, and then when it falls into the other meatballs, and it's just meatballs, it's a problem. Doesn't matter the ratio, because you're not looking, because we said chaticha nasas nevela, which means that we don't look at that meatball as just housing milk. The meatball becomes aser. So there's another concept that's very similar. Chaticha nasas nevela means that we look at the item that was cooked with the isser as not just housing the isser, but it becomes isser itself. A very similar shaila is efshar l'seichtoi. Efshar l'seichtoi means, let's say let's go with chazer. If you know the halachas, you'll know that basa b'chalav is a little different than chazer, but okay, let's just go with this case, the meatball. I have 1 ounce of milk that cooks with the 10 ounces of meatballs. A 10 ounce meatball. The meatball becomes aser, and then it cooks with the other ones, we say it's a problem. Efshar l'seichtoi is a shaila. Efshar l'seichtoi means can it be purged? What it means is, if you were to take this meatball and cook it with other foods, at a ratio where the original milk would be nullified. So the original milk is 1 ounce, the meatball is 10 ounces, and I take that 10 ounce meatball, which is now aser, and I mix it in with 60 ounces of chicken soup, whatever it is. Do we say that 1 ounce of milk left it, and now it's mutter? Efshar l'seichtoi mutter means that we look at the 1 ounce left, and now it's back to being permitted. Efshar l'seichtoi aser means, no, we don't do this. Once it's there forever. According to Rashi, efshar l'seichtoi mutter and aser is basically the same as chaticha nasas nevela. Because you say chaticha nasas nevela, meaning that the meatball itself becomes aser, then you cannot ever purge that meatball of the milk inside of it because it became a new isser. The opinions that hold Efshel Sechle Mutter don't believe in Chaticha Nasavela. According to Rashi, they're basically synonyms, and the Ran even is asked on this, if they're the same, then why do they have different, descriptions? Why is one Chaticha Nasavela, one is Efshel Sechto? When according to Rashi, they're basically the same. Efshel Sechto means you can never purge that meatball of the milk inside. Why? Because Chaticha Nasavela, they basically go hand in hand, according to Rashi. According to Ram, they're slightly different. Let's go with Rashi. They're basically hand in hand, which means that when Rab said the meatball is aser forever because Chaticha Nas Nevela, he's in essence saying Eshel Sechte aser. Says the Gemara, Mai Kasavar, Ikasavar Eshel Sechte Mutter, Chaticha Mai Nas Nevela. If he holds that you could purge that meatball of the milk inside of it, if you cook in it, shishim correspond. If you cook the meatball in a dish that has shishim corresponding to the original milk, then why is it a problem? Then why is it chaticha nas nevela? The milk should leave it. It must be that Rav holds efshar l'sachtai is aser. To itmar, and the truth is Rav said beferish. Rav Rechanin Rav Yechon Amri efshar l'sachtai aser. Rish Lakish the Amri Rav Shimon Bar Rabbi Rish Lakish the Amri efshar l'sachtai mutter. They hold efshar l'sachtai mutter because they do not say chaticha nas nevela. Okay, now says the Gemara. Right now we're saying that Rav holds efshar l'sachtai aser and chaticha nas nevela. Says the Gemara, v'savar Rav efshar l'sachtai aser vo itmar. Here's the problem. You have a kazayas basar shenafal l'toich yoyre shel chalav. I have a kazayas of basar. I have a so I have a meatball, a 1 ounce meatball that falls into 100 ounces of milk. So what's the halacha? So the meatball's a problem because the meatball is not 60 times the milk, but the milk is permitted. You could remove the meatball and drink the milk. That's the halacha. Why? Because the ratio, the meatball and the milk are not the same min. They're not min b'mino that we don't say it's not. We don't say it's never batal. It's min and she'ino mino, and therefore the milk is 60 times the meatball, so it should be batal. Says Rav, basar aser v'chalav mutter. Now that makes total sense. Here's the Gemara's point though. If you say chaticha nasas nevela and efshel sechti aser, then why aren't we concerned as follows? Again, chanan means, in essence, what chanan means is that the isser can grow. I have 1 ounce of milk that falls into a 10 ounce meatball. Instead of just saying that the 10 ounce meatball is housing the 1 ounce of milk, and then if it falls into 60 ounces of meat, it's going to be fine. But rather, the 1 ounce of milk takes the 10 ounce meatball and creates a 10 ounce of isser. So the isser actually grows. So the Gemara says, why don't you say the same thing according to this case like this? You have a piece of meatball that falls into the milk. It's 100 ounces to 1 ounce. Everything's fine. But wait, that meatball is going to suck in a little bit of milk, naturally, and then spit it out. Now that milk that it spits out should not be batal. Why? Because min b'mino lo batal. It's the same min. In essence, what you have over here is you really have two shilas. You have the meat in the milk, that's going to be fine. But what about the milk that's in the meatball that gets pushed out? That's going to be min b'mino of the milk, meaning you have the milk that's permitted, and then you have milk that was in the meatball that came out. Now, if you don't say chanan, everything's just a sponge. It's just flowing in and flowing out. So the milk goes into the meatball, milk leaves the meatball, everything's fine. But if you say efshel sachto aser and chanan, that means that the milk that goes into the meatball now becomes new isser milk, basar b'chalav dika milk. And then when it gets pumped out, it should not be nullified, because kosher milk and non-kosher milk are min b'mino. So every time you have a meatball that falls into a case of milk, it's not just an isolated case of meat against milk. Milk goes into the meat, becomes aser, and then gets pumped out. And it doesn't matter the ratio. Min b'mino is la batal. Go to the next page. So the Gemara, so that's a problem. In essence, why don't we say, if you believe Eshel Sachto Aser and Chaticha Nas Nevela, then every time the meatball falls into milk, it's going to absorb some milk, make that milk prohibited, and then pump it out. So let me just say outside what the Gemara is going to do. First, the Gemara is going to offer a suggestion that maybe milk and meat, the milk is actually permitted. When the pasuk says you're not allowed to eat losav hashel gedi b'chalev imo, the Torah is not answering the milk; it's actually only answering the meat. Meaning, maybe you're allowed to taka drink the milk in general, even if a taka has meat flavor in it. Meaning, maybe basar b'chalev is only a problem on the meat, not the milk. The problem is that's not true. So we're going to back to the original problem, which is why aren't you concerned that the milk gets absorbed in the meatball and then gets pumped out? And mimina lo batal. So the Gemara says the first attempt which I just mentioned, lo'olam kasava rav efshel sechli aser. B'shani hasam, perhaps the milk, even though it absorbed meat flavor, maybe all the milk is okay. Why? Damar karlu savasha gedi b'chalevimo. Gedi aser Torah v'lo chalav. But the Gemara is making a suggestion that perhaps basa b'chalav does not apply to the milk, it only applies to the meat. Meaning, milk and meat that cook together, you're not allowed to eat the meat. But the milk is fine. The problem is that's not true. You're telling me that the milk is always permitted, it's the meat that's the problem. What's the shear for isurim? For lashes and for all these, it's always a kazayis. So let's say you have a chatzi zayis basar, you have a half a kazayis of basar, a chatzi zayis chalav, and a half a kazayis of milk. Shebishlin zabazen, you cook them together. Now, Rav says you get lashes for eating it because you ate a full kazayis. You don't get lashes for cooking. The Gemara is going to address in a second. I don't understand. Be consistent. If you're combining the milk and meat together, then you should get lashes for both, and if not, not. But you see that if I have a half a kazayis of basar and half a kazayis of milk and I eat it, I get lashes for basar b'chalav. But wait a minute. If you only get lashes because you ate a full kazayis, but you only ate a full kazayis because you're combining the milk. If the milk is not what the Torah asered and only cares about the meat, then it's less than the shear. Says the Gemara, so it can't be that the Torah doesn't ask the milk. Of course the Torah asks the milk. So if that's the case, then when the meatball falls into milk, if you believe in Eshel Sechto Aser and Chatichan Asa Nevela, then why is it permitted, even though the milk is 100 times the meatball will absorb some milk in and pump it out while it's cooking and spit it out, in which case it's going to be mimimino lo batal. So the Gemara says, you're right, the case is where the milk that the meatball fell into is bubbling hot, it's boiling hot. And the Gemara has a rule that when something is boiling hot, it's only able to do one thing, meaning the meatball can only absorb, but it can't pump out. The mivla bola, the meat absorbs the milk, mivla pola, but it can't pump the milk out. Meaning when it comes to like a force outside of itself, the meatball can always just give off of its essence, but that's not the point. But you're talking about the meatball with the milk. It's only when it's very, very hot, it's only able to suck milk up, but it's not able to spit the milk out until the milk stops boiling. So the case is where it was boiling, so the reason why I'm not concerned that some of the milk will go into the meatball and then come out and the mimimino is because it just practically wouldn't do this. It only does that when the milk cools down, but not when the milk is boiling hot. So says the Gemara, yeah, but it can't be boiling forever. So once it stops boiling, it should be a problem. So the Gemara says, the case is where you got the meatball out of the pot of milk before the boiling stopped. Meaning, if you let it stop boiling, it would pump some of the milk out and it would be a problem. The case is where I got the meatball out, I took a toothpick and I pulled the meatball out while it was still boiling. Okay. Says the Gemara, two more sugyas. We'll see. I don't even know if I'm able to do the whole sugya of Efshel Asaychdai. Maybe we'll start it. Okay. One finish of this chatzi zayis basar gufa, chatzi zayis basar v'chatzi zayis chal shebishlin zavzeh. You have half a kazayis of basar and half a kazayis of milk that you cook together. So Rav said, loik al chila, so you get lashes for eating because we combine it together for the eating and it's a full kazayis. Loik al bishulai, but you don't get lashes for cooking. The problem is a pella. If you're combining the milk and meat together, then you should get lashes for both. If you don't combine it together, you shouldn't get lashes for either. Says the Gemara Manavshach. So that's a good question. So the Gemara says two answers. Really, we don't combine it together. So wait a minute. So that's why you're not going to get lashes for cooking. But why do you get lashes for eating? It's not a full kazayis. The answer is, the case of eating is not the same case of cooking. The case of cooking is where you have a half a kazayis of basar, half a kazayis milk, you put into a pot, cook it together. You're not going to get lashes. We don't combine it together. The case of eating is where it's not where you have a half and a half. It's where you have a pot of meat and a pot of milk and you mix it together. 10 kazaysim meat, 10 kazaysim milk, all gets mixed together. Mamish basar b'chalav deraisa. Then you took a half a kazayis of each and ate it. But it's not. You see, if it was just a half a kazayis of basar, half a kazayis of milk, that was the entire combination, then the taka would not be lashes deraisa. The case is where it was a full pot of meat and a full pot of milk, a full kazaysim, and you cooked it together. So each little bit is mamish basar b'chalav deraisa. Then you took a half a kazayis of basar, half a kazayis of milk, and ate it, but it came from a basar b'chalav deraisa, and therefore it's going to be a problem. Says the Gemara, or another answer, and that is change the girsa. we do combine it together, and you get lashes for both. It's really just have a kazayis basar, have a kazayis chalav, and you get lashes for both. Levi Omar af loik al bishuloi. Levi says taki, you get lashes for both. V'chein tani Levi masisan. Levi also taught in the brisa, kashem shaloik achilasai, kak loik al bishuloi. Ubeizi shalamer. You get lashes for both. When you cook it together, what's the definition of cooking? It's where a guy would eat it, meaning it has to be cooked enough that a guy would eat it, then it's considered basar b'chalav. Hold on 1 second.
Recording progress.
Okay, let's just finish up the daf. We're not going to be able to finish it fully because it's a cheshbon that continues into most of Amid Aleph tomorrow, but we'll start it. In this shaila of whether milk that falls onto meat, is it possible for the meat to ever become permitted if it then cooks into another pot that has the ratio that would nullify the milk? So again, milk 1 ounce falls into a meatball, 10 ounces, and it's a problem. Is there ever a way to make that 10 ounce meatball mutter? So if you say eshel sechle aser, it's basically chaticha nasavela. No, it becomes iser, and there's no way to purge it. If you say eshel sechle mutter, that means that if that meatball were to fall into another pot and cook with the requisite amount of ounces, let's say 60 ounces, then the milk will leave, and the meatball would actually revert back to being permitted. The Gemara says it's a machlokas tanoim, titania. The Brisa says like this: Tipas chalav shenofla ala chaticha. A drop of milk fell on a meatball. Kiva shenasatam bechaticha, chaticha atzonas nevela. That meatball becomes permitted. The Brisa says kol chatichas kulan. And then, if I were to then have that meatball again, the meatball's aser, and then the meatball asers the other meatballs. So again, the cases where the meatball is out of the liquid, we'll go with the sheet of the re. The meatball's out of the liquid, milk falls on, it's a problem. It asks the meatball, and then that meatball will ask the rest. Now, there's an obvious issue. How did the meatball get to be mixed in with the other rest? Did you cover it? Did you stir it? We'll deal with it in a second. That's Rabbi Yehuda said asers all of them, and that meatball is aser. Chachamim say no. The Chachamim say no. We don't look at the milk in the meatball isolated. We look at the entire pot. Is the entire pot 60 times the milk? Then it's fine. So it seems to be this shaila of, does it ask just the meatball or the entire pot? We don't exactly know the proper case. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi. Rabbi looks at these two opinions, that you have Rabbi Yehuda being very strict and the Chum being very lenient, and he says, I agree with Rabbi Yehuda if you did not stir. If you did not stir from beginning to end, then I agree with Rabbi Yehuda. But I agree with the Chachamim if you did stir. Now, what exactly is Rabbi saying, and what does each Tana say? So says the Gemara like this: My loynir v'loikisa. When Rabbi said that he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda when you did not stir, if the case is meaning did not stir at all, he says I agree with Rabbi Yehuda when you did not stir. Now, if that simply put is taken on face value, what it means is like this: you have the milk falls onto the meatball outside of the sauce, that asers the meatball. And then I didn't stir at all. If I didn't stir at all from beginning to end, I didn't touch it, no stirring, nothing, and no covering anything, then that meatball will never ask the rest because there's no liquid medium to continue it. So it says, My loynir v'loikisa, ilem loynir klal v'loikisa klal. If that's the case, then why is it asked the rest of the meatballs? How could Rabbi say, I agree with Rabbi Yehuda that it asks the entire pot, because the meatballs aser and asks the rest, because mimimina lo batal, when you didn't stir. If I didn't stir at all, then it should aser that original meatball, and then it should stop. The shiloh should stop because there's no liquid medium to continue the shiloh. Mivla bala, miflei polit. So that can't be the case. So what did Rabbi say when Rabbi said you didn't stir? What did he mean? It can't be you didn't stir at all. So the Gemara says what it means is you didn't stir the whole time, because if you stirred the whole time, then the milk would fall in and get instantly mixed into the entire pot. The case is where the milk fell onto the meatball, aser the meatball. Then you stirred. When it says loynir, it means you didn't stir the whole time. You only stirred afterwards. So the milk falls onto the meatball, asers the meatball, then you stirred, and it asers the whole pot. Okay? And Rabbi said, that's when I agree with Rabbi Yehuda. Now let me ask you a question. The milk falls onto the meatball, asers the meatball, then the meatball gets mixed into the rest. Why don't we say that the meatball, when it gets mixed into the rest, that 1 ounce of milk leaves, and that meatball becomes permitted? What's the answer? Says the Gemara, the answer is kasavar efshel sechle aser. So it's very clear as day that Rabbi paskins efshel sechle aser, and that's why when the milk falls onto the meatball and asers the meatball, and then the meatball gets mixed into the rest, it will never become permitted because efshel sechle aser. It's very clear that's Shitas Rabbi. Before we continue, tomorrow we'll talk more about this. The Gemara just wants to point this out. That means that Mechalad Rabbi Yehuda Savar. So here's the one issue though. Rabbi is saying that's when I agree with Rabbi Yehuda, which implies that Rabbi Yehuda says aser in all circumstances, even when it's stirred the entire time. Meaning Rabbi is saying, if you stir the whole time, I think it's permitted. I don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda. But if it fell onto the meatball and then astered it and then you stirred, then I think it's a problem. But if you stir the whole time, I don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda, which means that Rabbi Yehuda believes if you stir the whole time, it's still a problem. Rabbi's saying I don't agree with him, but Rabbi Yehuda would say that if you stir the whole time, it's a problem. The question is why? If the milk fell on and you instantly started stirring it, then the milk got equally distributed amongst the entire pot. Then why do we say it's a problem? As long as there's 60 in the entire pot corresponding to the milk, it should be fine. Why is Rabbi saying, I don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda, but that means that that's Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. But why? Says the Gemara, the Gemara answers, the answer is, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda asks it if you stirred the entire time is because he doesn't trust that you stirred well. You're right. If the milk were to fall and you instantly stirred right away in such a way that the milk fell into the pot and got stirred, equally distributed, you're right, it would be mutter. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't trust that you did it properly. Because what if you stirred it because you were clever, right? So milk falls on and you say, I'm going to be very clever. I'm going to stir right away because that makes it mutter. But that's assuming you stirred it properly. What if the milk fell on and you're like, I'll be so clever, I'm going to stir right away. And then you stumble and then it becomes usher, then you stir it. In other words, I don't trust that you stirred it properly. If you stirred it the whole time, it will be permitted. But Rabbi Yehuda's choishish, he didn't stir it properly. Rabbi's not choishish. They agree conceptually that if it's stirred properly, it'll be permitted. Rabbi Yehuda's choishish, he didn't stir it properly. All right, tomorrow we'll continue this discussion.